Good afternoon and welcome back to Law&Crime Trial Network. I'm your host, Brian Buckmire. There we have the sergeant testifying as to the procedures in which the area was secured and some of the chain of custody things that are very important as to bringing in certain parts of evidence. We have our good expert, Joseph, here with us to kind of break it down for us. Joseph, how are you doing today?
Doing very well, Brian. Good to see you, man.
Same as you. So in the break, we were talking about some of the intricate steps that this sergeant is talking about. Break it down for us. Why is this important and what does this highlight?
Yeah, just so our viewers can understand the complexity of a case like this, imagine, if you will, you've got a 1,000-piece jigsaw puzzle, and you just kind of take it and throw it everywhere. And when you're walking into a scene, that's how disoriented you are. So it really takes a lot of time to plan and to finally engage with the scene where you begin the actual processing. In this particular case, you've got a complex case that's involving a potential sexual assault, obviously a homicide. You've got clothing strewn about. It's very disorienting. So they're talking about, they address this idea of, well, is it common for you to hold a scene this long? And the young detective says, well, no, this, as a matter of fact, it's the first time I've ever done it. But this is not the first time this has ever been done. You have a highly complex case. You have the manpower to facilitate it. Keep this in mind, Brian. Not only did they throw tape up around the scene, they had to post a uniformed police officer at the point of entry for 24/7 for an entire week. That requires a lot of man hours to do this. So they're trying to be very, very careful in this case.
And it seems like that, and I guess the prosecution is hoping that that careful and deliberate actions is going to help to solidify any holes that might be poked in by the defense attorney to say, hey, maybe there's some sort of contamination or indirect transference, especially the DNA, because they're trying to say, hey, the DNA is here for a reason that is benign and not malicious. Right. But I believe they're trying I know I say this often, but they're trying to hold off all the holes and blocks all the types of ways the defense attorney can say, hey, here's a benign reason this happened or not. Does it appear that they're kind of tying up all those loose ends, or do you see any wiggle room where the defense might be able to slide in and say, hey, here's a misstep, here's a mistake? Do you see that? But I don't know if I do, but what about you?
Well, I got to tell you, Brian, your hypothesis about this, I think, is right on target. Because they're covering all of their bases from Jump Street here, relative to scene security and processing of the scene. So if this is drawn into question, the prosecution can kind of raise this issue. Well, what more would you have them do? I mean, they've done everything they've done everything humanly possible to guarantee the continuity of the scene, security of the evidence, and eventual collection and then, of course, processing back at the lab. What I'm hoping that they're going to be able to demonstrate is the entry and exit log that comes up. How many people had access to the scene? How many on the forensic team and how many on the investigatory side were watching or were being checked in as they came in and out of the scene? And did they follow proper universal precautions, hand covers, hair covers, shoe covers, all these sorts of things to guarantee that evidence is not going to be lost or contaminated?
Yeah. Great analysis from Joseph Scott Morgan, our forensic death investigator. We're going to listen to more about this case and get more analysis after this break. So again, as Joseph had outlined for us earlier, here is the sergeant outlining what was done and where they were looking. Joseph, one thing that popped up to me, and again, we were talking during the break, is just the way my brain works. It's a defense attorney. I know it's great for my clients. My mother and girlfriend probably hate it, but I'm picking up on a few key words when the sergeant is saying, I took photos of the things that were requested of me. When I hear that in my cases, I say, well, that means that your investigation was narrowed to a specific angle and you didn't get the broadest of information. So maybe there's someone else who did this. Does that help the defense attorney in terms of the narrowest of the investigation, or does it just show that this is a great investigation?
I think that probably it shows that there are multiple entities involved, that he's being directed by, say, someone that might exactly be his immediate superior, or in certain cases, if the crime scene technician is there and they're gloved up and they're handling fragile evidence, the crime scene technician will look at the available detective and say, take the camera and point it at this and document it photographically. Let's remember, that photograph that they take at the scene literally freezes time. There's the old legal comment about you can't unring the bell. You cannot go back in time and recapture that thing. He's talking about the idea that the scene is pristine. They want to capture that moment. So I don't know who directed him to take the photograph, but I think that it goes to show how thorough they were, and that this is probably a team effort moving forward.
Exactly. And to that point of team effort, we were talking about it during the break, and we were talking about the multitude of phrases, but the one that sticks out with me is sometimes there's too many chefs in the kitchen and everything ends up burned. And so, again, could the number of people there, and I think you highlighted it for us previously, but I'd ask you to say it again, could the prosecution demonstrate that, yes, there might have been 10, 15, 20 people, but it was so well organized, so such a well-oiled machine that everything works so well? Or could the defense attorney use that to say, hey, when there's too many chefs in the kitchen, something's about to get burned and something was wrong, something was mistaken, there's some sort of cross-contamination, and that's why we're here, and that's why my client is innocent? How does that play out?
Yeah, and I think that a lot of this is going to go to the point of security logs. Who logs in, who walks in and out of the scene? Hey, man, in my experience, the people that are chief among sinners for violations like this are generally high-ranking officials that just want to come out to the scene and stick their nose into the business of the detectives and to the other investigators there at the scene. Everybody has a job. Let's keep in mind, Brian, the case, any kind of crime scene case, it literally hinges on all of the thought and everything that happens outside the tape as much as it does within the tape. So you have to have a strategy moving forward. Who's going to be command and control? Who's going to be in control of everybody that's walking through that door, that's crossing underneath that tape? Who's going to be bringing evidence in and out? It is absolutely essential. I was involved in the Buckhead shooting in Atlanta many years ago. We had 16 people dead. My boss at the time never walked under the tape, but he stood outside the tape, and all of us that were working that scene, that mass murder, he would stand outside the tape and simply say, "What can I do for you? What do you need?" And that is the ideal situation.
Yeah. It's going to be interesting to see what the situation was here. I agree. What you describe as ideal. I'm guessing that the defense attorneys here are hoping that that situation was not ideal, and there might be something for them to argue. But we're going to definitely continue with this case as a direct, and maybe hear the cross-examination after this break. So we still have the sergeant on the stand again, as Joseph has described to us, illustrating the different steps that were taken in the investigation. Joseph, this new information that's coming to us, how is this building a better picture for, I guess, the prosecution to paint for the jury at the end of the trial?
You drown them with information, and it makes the head swim, I think, after a while for the defense. Keep in mind, if you're a defense attorney and say you have a limited budget, you have limited investigative staff, you see, and the defendant sees, this kind of tsunami of detailed information that comes washing over them, the capabilities of the police, and it goes to, in a lot of people's minds, validity of what the police department is doing. It validates how they're doing, the thoroughness of everything that's going on. And let's keep in mind, they're painting the picture of the last moments of this young girl's life and what happened to her and what happened to this family before and then in the midst and even after. Remember, they talked about going to the gravesite. They were looking at shoes. They were trying to find similar tread patterns and all these sorts of things, these tiebacks, if you will. So it's kind of fascinating to listen to.
So it appears right now, as we're talking, that the sergeant pulled out a wallet, I believe, of Roy Coons Jr.'s, and so they're talking about that. I'm not sure if we want to step into the court or continue talking. But we're going to continue following through while they're going through the procedural steps of talking about this information. But you're correct. It's a tsunami of information that's coming into defense. I guess for the defense, they've gotten all of this discovery. I don't practice in Tennessee, but I believe the laws are pretty clear across the board that this discovery was given to them before the trial had started. So maybe the defense is lying in wait to say, hey, I'm going to be able to poke holes here and there. Do you see any holes as he's testifying, or maybe just have to wait till the defense gets up to take their swing at this?
Yeah, I think that they're plotting. They're sitting there and they're thinking about their defense. How are we going to kind of mitigate everything that's being thrown at us at this point in time, because they're going to be awash in information and awash in evidence. I can only imagine how many pieces of individual evidence they brought out of that environment. And then you couple that with all of the interviews that they conducted, all the laboratory testing that was done, and this kind of impenetrable wall of expert testimony that's going to be offered up by the state. You got to figure that there is a hole somewhere that they can kind of progress through. The rub here is, will they make the right decision? Are they going to be able to poke holes in that one spot, because that's all they need relative to reasonable doubt?
Yeah, and we know during the opening statement, a big point that they made was there is no information, there will be no information that puts Roy Coons at the location at the time of the death, and that this whole case is going to be built on science. Science that says that he was once there, but maybe not there at the specific time, other than the alleged facts that go to the attempted rape. But we're going to find out more about the facts that this sergeant has to put into the record, as well as the analysis from Joseph after this break.